Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Respected viewers, welcome back to our live program in honor of a grand personality, the father of the 12th Imam, Imam al-Askari alayhi salatu wassalam. Alhamdulillah, we've had an in-depth discussion with our respected guest, Sheikh Muhammad al-Hilli, on the family of Imam al-Askari alayhi salatu wassalam, his brother, his mother. And before we continue, we have a beautiful nasheed. Inshallah, we have much to discuss and we have much to hear. So inshallah, we'll now pass on to our respected dear guest, Mulla Rashid. I'm sure you have a beautiful nasheed prepared for us and viewers are willing to hear you, inshallah. So please bless us with your words in honor of the Imam.
Inshallah. Thank you very much. I'm just going to start with a small introduction in Arabic, and then inshallah we'll get to the nasheed.
حب النبي الهاشمي ديني حب النبي الهاشمي ديني صلى عليه واهب اليقين صلى عليه واهب اليقين صلى عليه واهب اليقين فنظرة من رمش طرف عينيه لا شك تكفيني لا شك تكفيني حسن العسكري 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 the last of petals birthed by al-Batul gifted by Rasul father of Mahdi part of the flower who's known as Zahra rises another king from Hashimi his love is sown and dispersed by Zahra in heaven the seeds are blown scattered grains of intercession Hassan al-Askari 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 the lantern of light, beaming, shining bright, glowing with its might. Al-Hadi the guide, Al-Hadi the guide, and his golden dome reflects his household, a gift to mankind. O Samarra's pride, O Samarra's pride, his heart of gold, so behold the prince known as Zaki. His heart of gold, so behold the prince known as Zaki. The radiant gleaming path in difficulty. Hassan al-Askari, 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 Hassan al-Askari. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Ahsan, jazakumullah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you, inshallah, and beautiful to hear such words in honor of our 11th Imam. There are traditions actually from Ahlul Bayt themselves, where Ahlul Bayt would encourage reciting of shi'r, of poetry, from Imam Rida alayhi salam, Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam. They would come and recite in front of them, in their presence. Even Masaib sometimes, we have traditions from Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. Imam Rida alayhi salam would call them and say, recite for me something about my grandfather Hussein. Or sometimes they would say, recite for us something in honor of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wasalam. And they would bless them by even honoring them something as a gift in return. And sometimes they say, Yabna Rasulillah, ju'iltu fidak, may I be sacrificed for you? I don't want this. He says, no, this is as a gift from me to you for reciting in honor of us. So it's really, throughout the traditions of Ahlul Bayt, there's been so much emphasis on reciting for Ahlul Bayt, whether it's be in the form of poetry or be in the form of a lecture or, just to stand up and say something. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inshallah bless you for that. Sheikh, just to continue our conversation, I came across something very interesting which I want to share with you. A historian writes that out of all of the A'imma, the Imam who expressed his ilmul ghaib the most was Imam al-Askari alayhi salam. And it's interesting, and he gives a reason for it as well. He lists all of the kamalat, all of the mu'jizat or the miracles in which the Imam alayhi salam shows his ilmul ghaib to the people, knowledge of the unseen to the people. And he says the reason is because at that time, due to the high level of taqiyya, as you mentioned, where the Imam would say, do not meet me, do not greet me, do not say salam to me, stay away from me. Even if you see me from far, some companions would come and want to meet the Imam, but the Imam would say, just stay there. Yes. Don't come. I've even read a tradition that once the holy Imam al-Askari alayhi salam is going through a marketplace, and one of his Shia is sitting in the corner, and when he's in the market, right? When he sees the Imam, he wants to get up and come and greet him. The tradition says, Imam from far, he says, as in, quiet, Yes. In other words, you stay away. And it later explains to him there were spies watching. There were spies everywhere. But there was so much confusion, like you said, because of taqiyya and knowing that there will be the Mahdi who will be born, and the Abbasis would be fearful. These guys, the Alawis love them. The Shias, they love them. And at that time, places like Qom, places like Kufa, places like Azerbaijan, Georgian, and Basra, and all these places had become strongholds of Shia. And the Shia centers were, especially Qom and Kufa, these places were headquarters, if you like, of Shia. So whenever they would come from there to meet the Imam, or Imams would meet anyone, they would panic. They say, what if these guys rise up against us? What if they form a group against us or bring a revolution, or there's trouble for us? So they would not let the Imam meet anyone. But this historian, he writes that the reason that the Imam ﷺ used his ilmul ghaib so much was to show them the dalail of his imamah. To show them that I am the Imam. Yeah, maybe, I cannot come out and say, I am the Imam, you are to obey me. Or sometimes there was so much false propaganda against them. There were different ways that the Holy Imam would use his ilmul ghaib to show the people that I am the Imam. I'll give an example and I'll pass over to you. As you know, the Imam spent a lot of time in prison. Either in prison or under house arrest in Iraq. When he was brought to Samarra, Surra Man Ra'a, he was put in house arrest. And when he was not in house arrest, he was in prison. And when he was not in one or the other, he was summoned to the court of the Caliph Monday and Thursday. Every Monday and every Thursday, he had to go to the court of the Caliph. And we have many traditions where the Imam enters the court and what happens there. And this was a way to keep an eye on the 11th Imam. What is Imam al-Askari doing? Who is he meeting? Who is he greeting? Who is he speaking with? And what is he speaking? So now once the Imam is in prison, in one of these prisons, sometimes they'll be moved around from prison to prison. Different people had prisons. There's an interesting riwayah that exists here. Imam is in prison with some of his Shia. And then they gather around the Imam, and one day one of the Shia gets up and he says, Yabna Rasulillah, when will I be released? When will we be released from this prison? So the Imam says, had there not been one amongst you who is not from you, I would tell you when you would be released. So what do you mean? Had there not been one amongst you who is not from you? What do you mean by that? Then he points towards a guy who was sitting in the back of the prison, who was a prisoner. He says, he is not from you. He says, what do you mean? He says to him, Imam alayhi salam points to him to leave. He gets up and he leaves and he goes to the back. Then Imam, he says to his companions, this is a spy of Bani Abbas. If you don't believe me, check it. What do? They go to him, they check him. They find papers within his pockets in which he has been recording the conversations of Imam al-Askari alayhi salam with the Shia in prison, what they're talking, what they're discussing. And every time the guard comes, he hands those papers, and those papers are then taken back to the Caliph. Now imagine that. Imagine what kind of taqiyya they lived in, the latter Imams, as we mentioned. We don't have much from them because they weren't allowed to say much. We don't have much from them because they weren't allowed to meet openly. Even in prison, it's like having a CCTV camera, watching you at all times. Well, you didn't have a camera back then, but you had a spy who's constantly watching you and reporting you. So this was an ilmul ghaib of the Imam. When they held him, they checked his pockets. Exactly what the Imam said was there. Sheikhna, I want to pass over to you to share with us some more on
Absolutely, yes. This is very interesting about, maybe one way to look at it is the reason why the Imam alayhi salam wanted to establish this. And by the way, today we have a group of people who are questioning the belief that we have within the school of Ahlul Bayt, that the Imam alayhi salam, the prophets are given ilmul ghaib by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is a realization in the Quran, that this is not independent knowledge of the unseen. It's given to them by the Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But they say, no, only Allah has knowledge of the unseen, which is not in accordance with the Quran. But it's interesting because, of course, Imam al-Askari's time was a very delicate time because the next Imam would not necessarily be seen by many people. So it's the beginning of the preparation for the major occultation. And so the belief in Imamat needs to be deep, it needs to be not superficial. Because sometimes when you have someone next to you, you're confident. You say, okay, they're always there, they'll look after me, they'll be there for me. And you don't necessarily work hard regarding, for example, convincing people about this person. Because they're there. But when they're not there, there's a much more difficult task for the Shia to talk about the fadal of the Imams, the characteristics of the Imams. And so these need to be cemented. Imam al-Askari alayhi salam had to cement them, had to make people see. So in addition to the story you mentioned, there is a interesting story as well. There was a man by the name of Abu Sabagh al-Maliki. He says, I was with Imam al-Askari alayhi salam with 6 other Shia, and we were in a dungeon, also in a prison. He says, ثم انضم إلينا أبو محمد الحسن بن علي. So we were there and Imam al-Askari came with us. He said, we basically were one day sitting and we decided that every day we will fast. Mustahab fasting. We will fast. And because we're with the Imam, we're benefiting from him. And that's another beautiful thing, at least in the prison. They were next to, as you mentioned, the story. The spirituality, just being with the Imam.
Suhbah of the Imam.
One of them, with the Shia, one of the days, just didn't want to fast, but didn't want to tell the Imam or others that he wants to break his fast. So what he did was he waited when an area where there is no one watching. And he went in the corner and he broke his fast. Just ate something, like in the private. So he came after him, no sign. Imam looked at him and said to him very interestingly, Afatart, you have broken your fast. The man became a bit embarrassed. I was wondering, how does the Imam know? Of course, you can't wonder this if you're a true follower of Ahlul Bayt. You cannot do that, yes? It's like that particular lady, unfortunately, that woman in the Quran that questions the Holy Prophet. The Prophet came and said, you have conspired against me. She said, who told you? Man amba'aka bihadha? In the famous story of it's told in Surah, I think Al-Mujadala, chapter 66 of the Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells, Surah Tahrim, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us of these 2 women, wives of the Prophet, that conspired against the Holy Prophet. Here this man says to him, it doesn't say anything. Look at the Imam alayhi salam, is very nice. He says to him, Ukul al-laham. If you really wanted to break your fast, eat meat. Then he says to him, فَإِنَّ الْكَعَكَ لَا قُوَّةَ فِيهِ. It seems that man went and had this ka'ak. Now, either ka'ak was some cake, or in Iraq or in some countries, the Arabs know, ka'ak is like a rusk, hard rusk that you dip into tea. Most of us dip into tea to soften it, and then you have it, right? So that's what ka'ak is. Like so Imam says to him, if you're going to break your fast, don't break it with ka'ak. Break it with some meat. At least you get energy. So this man is thinking, I didn't tell anyone. And he actually knows how I broke the fast. What actually I had, what food I had, is something that Imam
so
alayhi
this is an
salam
indication again of ilmul ghaib.
Yes, how would the Imam know?
What's interesting is in the Holy Quran, there's a ayah regarding Isa alayhi salam, in which Isa alayhi salam says, I will inform you what you store in your homes. I will inform you what you've eaten in your homes. In other words, I know what you do in your homes. So Isa Nabiullah alayhi salam, if he has ilmul ghaib, then I am Ahlul Bayt who have maqam greater than Anbiya alayhi salatu
yes.
But Tariq al-Awla, they too have ilmul ghaib. And we have too many.
Isa will pray behind Imam al-Mahdi.
Imam al-Mahdi
if he had higher status, then he will have to be what? The leader of the Salah. Imam will pray
one of the sharait is that he has more ilm.
Yeah, exactly.
The one
so
who
that's
leads
at least. There's a very interesting story
Yes.
here that I would like to draw your attention. It's a nice one about Imam al-Askari alayhi salam, but also not only points to his excellence as attributes of the Imams, but their courage. You know, it's sometimes, you know, when we live in our lives like this, where alhamdulillah, we're able to express, we're able to celebrate, hear beautiful recitations, remember the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. But at times, you know, of the Ahlul Bayt, and even today, the Shia world, in some places, they're not able to express their love in the manner that they wish to.
Right.
They are under persecution, they're under difficulty. And Imam alayhi salam also was, of course, amongst the most difficult of times, was the time of the 11th Holy Imam. It is said that he was given to a prison of a man by the name of Yahya ibn Qutayba. So this Yahya had in his house a place where he keeps wild animals. He keeps wild animals. He decides that I will put Hassan ibn Ali into that chamber with the wild animals.
Some of them lions even.
Lions?
In a hadith.
Yes, vicious wild animals. So according to the riwayah, he wanted to do this. His wife came to him and said, don't do this. This will hurt you. You see, anyone who's the enemy of Ahl al-Bayt, who wants bad for the Ahl al-Bayt, will definitely see disgrace in this world.
Absolutely.
This has been seen throughout history. Yes, we'll see humiliation in this world.
And akhirah.
And akhirah, of course. For
yes.
akhirah is a foregone conclusion. But at the beginning, they will see in this world. He ignored this wife of his. And what did he do? He dragged Imam al-Askari alayhi salam into that area where there is the wild animals. The narration says, at that moment, he watched, he saw that the animals were calm and Imam alayhi salam was in sajda. We have this, by the way, also Imam al-Hadi alayhi salam.
That's right.
Yes, other Imam alayhi salam. That, you know, sometimes people say, this is a miracle from Allah. They did something to the animals. They don't understand that the maqam of imamah is not restricted to human beings. You know, sometimes you think, oh, it's the Imam of Ahl al-Bayt. This is Imamul Insi wal Jan, you know, the Imam of human beings and jinn. These animals, the awe that this individual, hujjiyah, they are not able to harm this individual. Not that in the sense that, you know, they are somehow stopped. They are just all of a sudden humbled before him. They are not able. So he saw all of them calm, and Imam alayhi salam in sajda, yes, قائما, then he says قائما يصلي. Then he took him out. And this is subhanallah how Allah disgraced him. He said, if the animals are like this, that means they're going to be okay. So he went and the animals devoured him. Completely tore him into pieces. After he had taken Imam al-Askari alayhi salam out of the particular area,
so
the chamber,
by his own animals.
By his own animals. They devoured him, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala disgraced him in this world before akhirah, as it is the outcome of those who stand against the Ahl al-Bayt alayhim salam.
Just to connect with this actually, before we come to Brother Mulla Rashid on the time spent in prison, there's a similar narration where the Imam was put in another prison and they inquired about Imam al-Askari alayhi salam. They said, how is he? And they said to him, we want you to put him in a prison of the worst of the worst. So now the prison in which the Imam was, they say, well, we found two of the worst of men right now in Samarra in Iraq, and we've put the holy Imam in their prison. But what's interesting is that those who we consider to be the worst we found them in prayer behind the Imam.
Subhanallah.
So when the Imam is in sajda, we found them praying behind the Imam. In other words, they were so moved by the personality of the Imam. You know, sometimes you see a righteous person, you're so moved by him. You meet a scholar, a marja, for example, you're so moved by him. I always say this, you know, sometimes people go and they meet, for example, the ulama in Najaf or the ulama in Qom, and they're so moved by the energy that comes, that radiates from them. Imagine the energy that radiates from the ma'soom, from the infallible. You know, this is just a gist
Unbelievable.
of what is, you know, what is to come when the 12th Imam comes. And hence the hadith is when the Imam will come and he will place his hand, وَضَعَ يَدْهُ عَلَى رَأْسِ الْإِبَادِ. He will put his hand on the heads of the people, and just by putting that, their knowledge will increase. So just by the presence of the Imam, these people were so moved. They said, why have you not harmed him? They said, how can we harm him? He prays all night and he fasts all day. We have absolutely no reason to harm him. So inshallah, before we continue, I want to bring back our brother Mulla Rashid, inshallah, to bless us with another beautiful nasheed in honor of Imam al-Askari alayhi salatu wassalam, or anything that you may want to, inshallah, contribute on today's program.
صلى على محمد وآل محمد.
إن في الجنة نهرا من لبن إن في الجنة نهرا من لبن لعلي وحسين وحسن لعلي وحسين وحسن إن في الجنة نهرا من لبن إن في الجنة نهرا من لبن لعلي وحسين وحسن لعلي وحسين وحسن كل من كان محبا لهم كل من كان محبا لهم يدخل الجنة من غير حزن يدخل الجنة من غير حزن إن في الجنة نهرا من لبن إن في الجنة نهرا من لبن لعلي وحسين وحسن لعلي وحسين وحسن حب آل البيت فرض عندنا حب آل البيت فرض عندنا وبهذا الحب لا نخشى المحن وبهذا الحب لا نخشى المحن إن في الجنة نهرا من لبن إن في الجنة نهرا من لبن لعلي وحسين وحسن لعلي وحسين وحسن صلى على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل Muhammad. Jazakallah. Brother, Allah bless you, mashallah, for the beautiful recitation. Before we move over to our final part of the program, alhamdulillah, we have a surprise today for our mu'mineen. And inshallah, since we are celebrating the birthday of the 11th Imam, well, you cannot have a birthday without a cake, right? So, alhamdulillah, we have been blessed that today we remember Imam al-Askari alayhi salatu wassalam. Before we cut the cake, just a small point here for our respected audience, lovers of Imam al-Askari alayhi salam. Just came across a narration, not a narration, one of the aqwal of the ulama, Marhum Ayatollah Sheikh Mujtahidiyat Tahrani. He says, anytime you have a haja, anytime you have a dua, and I found this very powerful actually. Anytime you have a dua, anytime you have a haja, you want to make istighatha with the 12th Imam, he says, call the mother of Imam al-Hujjah. Call Lady Narjis, salamullahi alayha. Call a father of Imam al-Hujjah, Imam al-Askari alayhi salatu wasalam, and ask them to ask their son to help us. Because it is wajib on the son to listen to the parents. So imagine this, when you need help and you want to call Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salatu wasalam, call him through his mother and his father, Imam al-Askari alayhi. And I found this very beautiful. I read this maybe two days ago. It says, call Lady Narjis, because the mother holds a maqam. The mother holds a position. Now imagine being the mother of Imam al-Mahdi and the wife of Imam al-Hassan al-Askari alayhi salatu wassalam. Thank you so much, Sheikhna.
May Allah bless you, and congratulations. We send the most auspicious and felicitations to the master of our time, Imam Sahib al-Asri wal-Zaman. Ajjal Allahu ta'ala farajahu sharif, to all our eminent maraji', to all mu'mineen and mu'minat on this auspicious occasion. And we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us all the tawfiq to visit Samarra, to pay respects inshallah to Imam al-Hadi and Imam al-Askari, Lady Narjis, as well as Lady Hakima and Lady Hudayth. By the way, the mother of Imam al-Askari is buried there. Unfortunately, we only have 4 graves, but she is actually in that area, in the house of Imam al-Hadi and Imam al-Askari. So let's not forget her, Lady Hudayth or Lady Salil, her name is, and we ask Allah to make us of those who attain their shafa'ah on the day of Qiyamah, inshallah, and be those who will be taken to paradise in the hands of Imam al-Askari alayhi salam.
Sheikhna, we'll allow you to do the honors of just slicing the cake, and inshallah with that we'll end the program. Inshallah.
Thank you so much. It is better if the Sayyid does it.
Inshallah, we'll do it together perhaps.
Bismillah.
Jazakumullah.
Ya Allah, Ya Allah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
اللهم صل على محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.